The main character, Matt, is hilarious. Like, he doesn't think he's hilarious, but he is hilarious, especially since he's taking care of his recently deceased brother's family on their farm, and he doesn't like farming, and all these really, really sad things are happening to him. Hi there, and welcome. My name is Kailey, and this is my older sister, Alina, who has actually never been on the channel before, so this is her first time, so welcome!
Thank you.
And we are kind of stuck inside today. Well, okay, so it's really cold outside. It's like -2 for a high today, and there's about 6 inches of snow on the ground. So we've been inside, and it's been really great for having lots of time to read a good book. But the thing is, both Alena and I are very particular about the kind of books we read, because we like to read books that are Christian, but beyond just having like the Christian label, also to have like to be really clean, to also be edifying, and to build up our character while we read them. And there's so many books out there, even with that Christian label, like I said, that kind of leave you feeling a little dirty after you read them, or you don't really like want to share that you were reading that book because you're a little ashamed of some of the things that are written in those books. So our goal today was to share books that you can read and feel good about, also have really good plot lines that keep you very engaged. We're going to start by sharing those books. We're also going to be giving each of the books a rating for its Christian worldview, for its cleanness, as in like violence, romance, and the cleanness of the humor content in the book, as well as like how the book made us feel. Was it cozy? I guess that'll be our 3 different ratings. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? Okay, I will. All right, so on the top of my stack I have a book that is very dear to me, and it is Raiders from the Sea by Lois Walfred Johnson. And this is part of the Viking Quest series. I think there's 6 or 7? 6, okay. And what I love about these books is that, like, at the very beginning I was like, I don't know, it's not really my genre, I don't know. Because it's like about this young girl who's kidnapped by the Vikings, and it just goes through her story of like when she's with them, and then in the end, well, I don't want to share what happens in the end, but it was really good. And my mom read this series too. In fact, most of my family has, and we all loved it. The character transformation that the main character goes through throughout the whole series, and the ending was so sweet. I won't share it because that would be giving things away, and we don't want to do that. The gist of the story is this young girl gets kidnapped by Vikings. It's not like the genre that I would generally read. When I first started it, I was like, I don't know, I generally don't read this kind of book. But as I got more into it, I was like, oh, no, actually, I want to read about the Vikings all the time. We're going to give each of these books a rating for their Christian world, yes. Christian world. Their Christian world. Alina is so much better than words.
Better than words.
Alina, one, is better than words, but she is so much better with words than me, because I just tend to get going way too fast with my words. She like thinks about things and then says them, versus me, who says things and then thinks about what I was saying. So for its Christian worldview, I would give this one a 9. For its cleanness, as in romance, violence, its sense of humor even, I would give it a 10. And for its coziness, how it made me feel, also a 10.
So the book that I'm going to recommend is Dreams of the Heart by Penny Zeller. With all of Penny's books, she does a really good job of putting in very solid faith content, of presenting a good gospel message, and of having a very clean romance. I love the premise of it. It's about a deputy in a small town, and he is he's watching out for the gambler's daughter from afar and trying to just make sure that she is taken care of because her father isn't taking care of her. And this eventually drives him to marry her, but then it becomes a question of how are they going to become a family unit. So I would say that for a Christian worldview, I'd give her a 10. For overall cleanness, as in romance, violence, I'd give her a 9. And for her books make me feel, they're always very cozy, I'd give it a 9.
Okay, my next book. I do not have as many books as Alina does because I have not been really good about reading lately, unlike Alina, who reads a lot of books. Okay, so first of all, look at the yelling guy on the front. This is The Boy Colonel by John J. Horn, and this is the first in a series. There's a couple other books after it, and to share a funny story, my brother Caleb actually got this book for Christmas many years back when he was quite young, so I was quite young as well, and he read the book, and then he said, Kailey, you need to read this book. And I was like, no. Like, there's a screaming soldier on the front. We would go back and forth on books often because he thought all the books that I read were like silly girl tea party stories, and I was like, and all that you read are silly boy gun stories. I don't know. And since we've grown up a little bit, we have actually read the books that each other recommends, and so I read this book and we've actually changed our minds. We're like, oh, okay, so your opinion on books actually is kind of solid, and that actually kind of was a good book. On a scale of 1 to 10 for Christian worldview, I would give this a solid 10. There was nothing in here that I was like, I don't quite agree with that. As far as the cleanness for violence, there's war in this book, there's a lot of action and adventure, there are things that happen in this book, so I'm not going to give it a 10, maybe a 7 or an 8, honestly. But the romance that was in here was very clean. It wasn't like overwhelming. And then for like coziness and how it made me feel, it was not cozy at all. I'd give it a 2 because I couldn't put it down. But it did make me feel really good, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 9 anyways.
The next book that I'll recommend is actually a series. There are 2 books in the series that are out right now. This is the For Liberty and Conscience series by Jana Boss. And this is set prior to the American Revolution and up through the American Revolution. And this is just a really great series that talks about church history and American history and a lot of the war that happened in the South that isn't usually talked about when in books that are set during the American Revolution. For the Christian worldview, I definitely rate it a 10. Jana does a very good job of bringing her faith onto the page and relaying it very clearly. For the content, for violence and romance, there is some violence because, of course, this is set during the war, and of course you're going to get a little blood on the pages, but nothing was ever described graphically or in a way that was like, I can't stand this. Actually, I don't often read war books just because they're kind of gloomy, but these do not leave you with an overall gloomy sense when you read them. So I'll definitely give that. I would give it a 10, but some people might give it more of a 8 or a 9. In romance, there is a very little bit in the second book, but very clean, so I'll give that a 10. And then overall, how it made me feel, that I'll definitely give a 10. I loved reading these books and got through them very quickly.
So my next book recommendation is very near and dear to my heart, and that is because it was written by somebody that I know very well. She's my best friend, and she's actually sitting right next to me. So if you are looking for a very just cozy overall, family-centered, sweet, clean, feel-good Christian historical fiction, then you must check out Alina's books. This is the first in your series. This book I really love, A Bargain to Keep, because I helped come up with kind of the beginning, and it's really funny, and every time I read it I just laugh so loud, It was like really good. Or sorry, this is like the prequel, and this is the first book in the series. This one is also hilarious, and I think I love this one especially because this man Matt here, he is such a character. He's so put upon by all the trouble that he goes through, and he's trying to take care of his deceased brother's family, and it's on a farm, and he doesn't like farming, and it's honestly hilarious. And I don't know, this might be my favorite book that you've written. And then there is the second book in the series, and look at this gorgeous cover. I mean, okay, just look at this gorgeous cover. Okay, but the story is even more gorgeous. And I loved this one. In fact, I read it for the third or fourth time just 2 days ago. Right now I'm holding it in my hand, and nobody else can hold it in their hand because it's not quite out yet. But very soon, in fact, next Wednesday, it's coming out. Lovely story. The family element in this was so strong. I cried. Like, it was like my third or fourth time reading. I cried. Like, for Alina's books, oh no, I'm gonna rate you in front of your face.
Hope it's good.
Hope it's good. All right, so for Christian worldview, I'm gonna give it a 10 because we have the same Christian worldview, and like, her theology is sound. For cleanness and violence, romance, and the humor as well, I would give it a solid 10 again because, well, okay, wait. There are a couple fights in here.
Don't forget that.
There's a couple fights. So I probably shouldn't give it a complete 10.
No.
Okay, so on the violence, I can't give it a complete 10. Maybe a 9? Sure. Okay, but there are times when some characters in this book feel pretty bad. They get pretty beat up. So maybe even an 8.
Yeah, could be.
Okay, for romance, there is romance in these books. But it's not spicy, and it's not hot, and it's very kid-friendly. In fact, we read these books as a family, and we all laugh, and we all enjoy them, and there's nothing that we like don't want my 6-year-old sister to listen to. So again, like, for a historical Christian romance, I'm gonna give it a 10 because there's such clean, good romance in here. And then the humor, there's really good humor in here, and again, maybe I just think that because some of it I helped come up with. It's good humor. I'm gonna give it a 10. All right, I'm literally out of books. Your turn.
So the next book that I'll recommend is Abounding Hope by Cindy K. Stewart, and this is a story that takes place in World War II in Poland. The story follows a lady who is trying to get some children that she's watching out of the country, and she's having an old friend help her do that. For Christian worldview, I'd give it a 10. I thought that the faith content came across very well in the story. There is a little bit of violence in the story. The romance was pretty good. I'd probably rate that aspect of the story about 8 or 9, somewhere in there. And as far as how it made me feel, it was definitely one of those books that had me on the edge of my seat. You definitely have to make sure that your heart is ready to pump very fast while you're reading this book, but it was a great read. Next up, I'll recommend Robin Lee Hatcher's book, The Shepherd's Voice. And this is a story that takes place during the Great Depression. It's about a lady who has a sheep farm and about a man who is kind of following the prodigal son trope, except in this case, his father is not willing to accept him back. And so the story follows along as he is seeking to figure out who he is, what his standing is before the people around him and before the Lord. And the Christian worldview in this book is fantastic. The gospel message comes through very strongly, and after I finished reading that book, it made me think very hard about all the different themes that were covered in the story, about the importance of meditating on scripture, and about having a proper view of ourselves based on God's word. As far as the violence and romance, I'd probably give it about a 9 or 8, somewhere in that range. Book, how it made me feel. It was definitely a very heartwarming story, one that's a great cozy read. So I'd give that a 10. And then the last book that I'll recommend is The Pursuit of Miss Parrish by Grace Hitchcock. This is a story that follows a girl who is serving in the Harvey House, which was a establishment along the railroad. It took care of feeding passengers on the trains. So I found that element very interesting to learn about the historical side of these houses that were a place for young women in need of work to be able to find a way to provide for themselves while still maintaining their moral uprightness and good character. In this story, the girl is originally coming west as a mail-order bride, but in the train station she realizes she may have made a very bad mistake and that the man that she is going to marry might after all be a criminal. And so the story begins, and it has a lot of good Western feels to it.
That's all you're going to tell me about the story? I'm just like listening. I'm like sitting back here ready to hear the whole plot.
Yeah, that's it. As far as the Christian worldview, I'd give that a 10. I think that the faith content came across pretty well in that book. And for violence and romance, I'd probably give it an 8. Way that it made me feel, I read it on some very cozy afternoons and evenings, actually during her graduation. So I would go downstairs and pull pork, and then I'd come upstairs and relax by reading that book. It was definitely a very good book, and I'll rate it 10.
So if those books sound interesting to you, Alina has graciously offered to link all of them in the description below because I don't know. Okay. The honest truth is I don't have the patience to link everything, but she does because she is wonderful and is so gracious to do all that for you. So if you think any of those books sound really fun to read, then go ahead and check them out. There's a couple that she mentioned that I have not read. I'm like, oh, maybe I should go read those. And if you have any recommendations for your girl here who loves reading, but nowadays I don't make a lot of time for it, so it takes a really good book for me to sit down and actually read it. Like if you have any good book recommendations, comment and I will read those at my discretion. So yeah, thank you for coming and hanging out with us today, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye! Bye!